What is up, guys? Rick Hackus here, and Bungie just had another Taken King reveal stream. This time they talked about strikes. In the gameplay in the stream, they simply played a new Taken King strike that took place on the Dreadnought, which is a new playable space in the Taken King. Again, they played this strike and also generally talked about a ton of improvements coming to strikes in the Taken King. We're going to be talking about what these improvements are, if they're enough to radically improve strikes for the Taken King, and any lingering concerns we still have. So without further ado, let's get started. What did Bungie do to improve strikes for the Taken King? Well, firstly, one of the things that some people may consider small, but I think is substantial, is that there is now loot tied to specific strikes, and more than just ships as it is now. For example, doing a specific strike and killing that strike boss could net you a special armor or weapon that is again tied to that strike boss. We don't know the exact details of these weapons or armor pieces. It sounds like they're probably going to be blue or rare or purple legendary rather than, you know, an exotic for any means like that, but that is still pretty amazing. And again, we don't know the details of these exact loot pieces, but I really hope that it's more than just aesthetics, like it's more than just an auto rifle that has a different camo. I hope, you know, if it is an auto rifle tied to a certain strike, it has maybe a unique perk or a unique perk setup that actually makes it different than the other loot in the game and actually makes it desirable. Because coming into Destiny, I know I was one of those people when I first bought the game that I always expected this to be in the game in the first place. You know, defeating Sepix Prime would grant you an awesome, cool looking Fallen themed weapon, and that was never the case. It sounds like they are actually implementing it this time, and again, I just hope that the loot tied to these strikes has enough diversity and uniqueness that is actually desirable. And aside from that though, it is definitely an improvement to the game and to strikes. Now, definitely a suggestion that I would have for this loot aspect would be to tie different mission objectives to acquiring these loot pieces rather than just relying on pure RNG. For example, to get, you know, the auto rifle we've been talking about, how about instead of just, again, relying on purely RNG, you have it so that you have to complete the strike without any of your teammates dying, or you have to complete it under 5 minutes or something like that, and that would be definitely a little bit cooler than just grinding the strike over and over and over again and praying for it to drop. Now, moving on to the next strike improvement, and this one's a biggie and it's really going to help with strike replayability. Basically, in the stream they went into a certain room. Then Deej and the Bungie developers started talking about how this room was special and that the enemy composition within this room would change. Firstly, in terms of race, so sometimes you would go into the room and it would be Cabal. The next time maybe you're doing the strike, it would be Taken, and then maybe the next time it would be Hive. That is awesome. I hope it's probably just going to be two enemy types switching, Cabal and Taken, back and forth, but even then going and fighting Cabal and then the next time going and fighting Taken, that's going to be a ton of variety. And in addition, the enemy composition of that race will change as well. So maybe it's Cabal one time and you're fighting a lot of Scions, like it's all these yellow health Scions you have to fight. And then if you do the strike again, maybe it's a ton of yellow health phalanxes now. So even though it's Cabal both times, the fact that the enemy composition will change will also radically improve replayability because it's going to be a totally different style of fight and gameplay each different time you do it. This is just a massive overall improvement to strikes, and I have no complaints about this being implemented. Now let's move on to the biggie, the main thing that they're really overhauling in the strikes, and the main thing that I am impressed about is the boss fights. Now, I had gone over mainly in my Galahorn video talking about how, you know, nerfing the Galahorn and the Galahorn being overpowered was simply a symptom of bad boss design. You know, the Galahorn is extremely effective against Sepix Prime. And it's extremely effective against every boss because every boss is so similar. Every single boss in the entire game has a long-ranged attack, so they can shoot you from across the map with an extremely powerful long-range attack, and they have a close range area of effect attack. So if you try to get up close with a shotgun, they'll just, you know, stomp the ground or whatever and kill you right around them. And if you try to poke out of cover for an extended period of time and maybe do some damage with a primary, they'll absolutely destroy you like the Nexus boss, just blasting you with energy beams. So you only really have the option of leaning out of cover, damaging them a ton for a short amount of time, and going back into cover. What does that sound like? A rocket launcher. What's the best rocket launcher? The Galahorn. So it just totally makes sense. Now in that video I suggested that instead of just having these same bosses over and over and over again with tiny bit different mechanics, they have totally new bosses. For example, a boss that would do only melee attacks. Like that boss would really vary up gameplay, and the weapons they're going to use in that encounter and the tactics they're going to use are going to be totally different than any other boss fight in Destiny. In addition, maybe a boss that has only a long range attack. So if you're able to get up close and kind of, skirt around him and be really agile, you can get a lot of close range shotgun damage on him. Well, surprisingly, Bungie answered both of my wishes, because in the boss fight of the strike that was revealed in stream, you actually fought two different Cabal leaders. One of them had no range attack and was melee only and had a jetpack, and it would jetpack around and try to punch you, which was awesome. That was exactly what I was asking for. And you could even tell in the gameplay, their tactics and what they were doing is totally different from other boss fights, because they weren't just like hiding in a corner trying to pick at it with an icebreaker. They had to really move around because the arena was also designed for this melee encounter. Now in addition to that, there was the other Cabal leader had only a long range like artillery attack and had no melee attack, so their tactics instantly changed. They had to get up close, and they were utilizing shotguns and fusion rifles, and they would kind of try to outmaneuver him because they knew if they stayed at longer ranges, that's when they're actually most vulnerable. Now, aside from having these two unique and awesome differentiating bosses, they actually had a really cool way of fighting them. One would come out and you would fight him down to half health and then he would run away. The other one would come out and you would do the same, and then they would both come out at the same time and you'd have to defeat them both. In addition, they killed the melee one first, and the other one actually took the melee one's jetpack, and so you had one with kind of both abilities at the very end. It could melee you and it could have the long range attack, but it was just for the very end of the fight. So it was just a really awesomely designed boss encounter from what we saw. And again, I couldn't be happier. They gave me literally what I asked for. If Bungie keeps up this same kind of boss design in the rest of the strikes, I have no problem in saying that the new Taken King strikes look like they're a massive, massive improvement over the vanilla Destiny strikes. Like, it's not even close. The boss differentiation from what I've seen from that strike was so much different than anything in Destiny. I am so looking forward to playing strikes in the Taken King. However, there is still some concerns that I have about these strikes. First and foremost being what I just brought up. There's no guarantee the other strikes are anything like this. This one example was awesome, but it could just be Bungie picking, the most diverse strike they have. The other strikes might be boring. Now then again, Bungie have said that they're using these kind of mechanics and ideas in the other strikes, so I really doubt that's the case. But the main concern of myself and definitely the community, like, it was crazy when I was watching the stream and the stream ended, I looked over the chat and almost every single person in the chat was saying the same thing at the same time. They all went at the same time. That's it? That was it? That was really short. People were extremely surprised by how quickly the strike was over. And actually, I would have to include myself as one of those people. I was surprised just how quickly they beat it. There really didn't seem like there was a lot of gameplay leading up to this boss fight. The boss fight was really cool. The boss fight took a little while, and it was definitely the best part, but all of the gameplay leading up to it, they seemed to speed through. This isn't helped by the fact that they were kind of playing slowly. Like, every time Deej and the developer would talk, the three fire team members would kind of slow down. They wouldn't even move forward with the mission. They would just kind of stop and mess around while Deej talked. And in addition, they were kind of showing off all these different mechanics and stuff, so they were playing at a slower pace. And that's not all, they also weren't outfitted with the best weapons. No one had an exotic armor piece or an exotic weapon, so when you're doing this with your fire team, you're going to be much better outfitted. In fact, one of the people doing the strikes even had a blue primary. So when you do this, you'll just be killing guys way faster, and you won't be pausing for Deej to talk, so you're going to be running through the strike at an even faster pace than they did. Again, this was my main concern after watching the stream, and it seemed like most people's main concern was just how rapidly they completed this strike. I will say, in Bungie's slight defense, maybe it's just because we're so excited for this big reveal and you want more, and so it probably lasted about as long as a Nexus strike lasts nowadays. And so in that aspect, it kind of slots in with the other strikes. But then again, if Bungie keeps saying, oh, we've changed strikes, there's so much more, they're so much more amazing, it's like, well, why the last 2.5 minutes, Bungie? Like, you couldn't make the encounters last a little longer? So that is definitely a concern. And yet again, when I actually think about it, I don't really want a super long strike. If I'm doing a strike playlist, I want to just be able to bang out a strike, fight the boss, have a fun time, and go on to the next strike. So I'm kind of at odds with myself. In one aspect, I want there to be more in the strikes because I was promised more. And the other aspect, looking at it realistically, I'm not that put out by a short strike. But to be frank, I really hope that this is simply one of the shorter Taken King strikes. You know, Destiny right now has some strikes that take longer than others. Omnigul definitely takes longer than the Nexus. So I really, again, I hope that this is just one of the shorter ones and they're showing this off because I had a really cool boss fight. If all of the strikes are this length, I do have a little bit of a bone to pick. I think that's a little bit ridiculous having all of these strikes extremely short. That being said, if you're not really a PvE focused player, you're not really going to be playing the strike a ton, aside from maybe a few runs during a Vanguard playlist, but you're mainly just going to be playing this when it's a nightfall or a weekly, and in that aspect, you know, those can take a lot longer than simply doing the normal strike. So this time constraint may not be concerning at all if you're doing the nightfall version of this strike. And actually, you know, people were saying during the boss fight, it's like, this is going to be a nightfall. This is going to be brutal as a nightfall because the arena at the very end looked extremely open, and again, as a nightfall, that could be a bitch to beat. I'm not going to lie about that. So that's it for the video, but I just want to say that if you feel like I'm not really answering your comments or you want to get in touch with me, just follow me on Twitter. I'm usually extremely good with replying to any sort of tweets I get, so if you have a question about anything, don't be afraid to follow me on Twitter. And same goes for Twitch as well. I hope you guys enjoyed, and as always, have a good day.